Hi, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from Street Scores, and man, we have a lot to talk about today. Some big news, several topics. It's kind of a Rico report where we're going to talk about a lot of different things, but we have some main topics to talk about. First of all, potential Washington Commanders offensive coordinator candidate Charles London is getting a lot of high praise from the Senior Bowl these past few days. Y'all know my favorite potential candidate is Thomas Brown. I want a young, creative, innovative, offensive-minded type of guy. But from everything that I'm seeing and hearing from this Senior Bowl, Charles London is starting to move up my list. He may be one of those guys that just has it in him, sort of like the head coach that the Texans just hired. So we got to take a look at this whole Charles London situation, his history as far as coaching goes in the NFL so far, and why he could potentially be a great candidate for us. Also, Scott Turner goes to the Raiders. I want to dive into his role and all of that, and whether the Raiders are getting a potentially good offensive-minded guy on their staff, if he's a good fit and all of that type of stuff. Also, Todd Monkin going in for a second interview with the Ravens. Of course, as a Georgia fan, that makes me very sad, but as a Commanders fan, that does affect the chances of Eric Bieniemy coming to the Commanders as a potential defensive coordinator. And then also, one slight little change in detail that's really showing that Dan Snyder is on the way up out of here. I mean, we've already heard a lot of concrete reports that the Commanders should be sold before the end of March, but this small little detail that @EB Junkies pointed out is pretty interesting. I mean, it's already looking like a done deal, but this could put your heart at ease even a little bit more. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get notification immediately, and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one, make sure you pull up every Sunday for the live call-in show where I open up the phone lines and y'all call in and you voice your opinions, you ask whatever questions you may have. We debate about a lot of stuff. We talk about draft, free agency, franchise quarterback, offensive coordinators. We even had a debate going last Sunday about who's more irreplaceable, Daron Payne or Montez Sweat. Who would you prefer to pay long term if you could only choose one of the two? So we talk about all kinds of stuff like that. And again, I open up the phone lines for y'all to be a part of the show and everybody hear you voice your opinions and things like that. So make sure I pull up every Sunday for that. And without further ado, let's get it. All right, let's start with the Charles London situation. First of all, some really positive words for Charles London, who of course interviewed for the Commanders offensive coordinator job just a little while ago. And this is Louis Riddick. First of all, he tweeted, "The new coaching format for the Senior Bowl in 23 provided the chance for assistant coaches across the NFL to be assigned to elevated roles. Example, Bears offensive coordinator Luke Getsy is the head coach for the American team, which is a brilliant idea. And with that as a backdrop, goes to the next tweet. I'm gonna let y'all in on something. Current Falcons QBs coach Charles London was elevated to the role of offensive coordinator for the American team for the Senior Bowl. I've known Charles for years, and if you watched our practice coverage this week, you noticed, and then in all caps, he is a freaking star. All caps, exclamation points, and everything. And it's not just Louis Riddick. A lot of people are raving about him. A lot of the guys that are at the Senior Bowl, a lot of draft analyst type of guys that have podcasts, a lot of NFL analysts, a lot of random people on Twitter. Everybody absolutely loves Charles London right now. I'm hearing that he's given like the best balance of being tough on players, but also giving them great advice, instructing them and encouraging them to do better. It's like the perfect balance there. Apparently, the way he's talking about plays and coaching the kids up, everybody's learning something. Even grown adults and analysts and reporters are feeling like they're gaining something just by listening to this man talk. He was mic'd up on ESPN2 one of these past few days. I wasn't able to catch that and I haven't been able to find the footage, but I wish I could. But everything I'm hearing everywhere, people absolutely love this man. I'm hearing that he has crazy energy and he is not playing with people. If you do something wrong, he's calling you out for it. Again, it's like the perfect balance of being harsh and critical, but also very helpful and instructive and all of that type of stuff. Just a true leader right now. And just to go back to the energy thing, I mean, we're losing Chris Harris potentially to the Titans at the very least, but maybe even another team for a defensive coordinator role. I believe it's the 49ers. So with us potentially losing probably the most energetic coach that we have out of our entire coaching staff, to bring in a Charles London to pretty much replace that would be really nice. I can't imagine training camp without Chris Harris's voice yelling everywhere. And remember, when Jahan Dotson was mic'd up, rookie season, training camp, only been on the Commanders for just a couple of months, and he was just in practice chilling, you know, stretching, doing this, going through his normal routine. Chris Harris comes out of nowhere and basically tells him, we're going to shut you down today. You're not going to do nothing today. Jahan Dotson responded to that by having one of his best days of practice. That's the type of impact that Chris Harris has. Even though he's only a DB's coach, his energy is infectious to the entire team. Even a young rookie wide receiver that has nothing to deal with a DB's coach's actual responsibilities. And it seems like Charles London is coming with that same level of energy. He may not be as much of a one-on-one trash talker as a Chris Harris, but he's going to be one of those guys that calls people out, is going to be one of the loudest and having the most energy and things like that. And I would love to be able to replace Chris Harris with something like that. I can't imagine a smooth, calm Commanders practice and training camp. That just doesn't even sound right. And then I also think he deserves a lot of credit for what he's doing, because I'm hearing that his team is dominating on offense. I mean, granted, the offensive line talent is stellar. It's crazy. You can argue that the offensive line and maybe cornerback have been the most impressive positions at the Senior Bowl. And going into the Senior Bowl, a lot of people expected that. So it's pretty much right on schedule. So even though his offensive line has been blocking their tails off, his offense has just been dominant, period, top to bottom. And I think that's pretty impressive, because if you think about it, he doesn't have any QBs, really. And it's a very weak wide receiver class. His American team that he's leading is looking really good. But at the same time, when you look at the American team's quarterbacks, you have Tyson Bagent. I'm not even exactly sure who that is, from Shepherd College. Max Duggan from TCU, who has a little bit of talent, but you saw what my Georgia Bulldogs did to him. Hendon Hooker. I haven't been able to watch a lot of the Senior Bowl stuff. I've mostly been looking at offensive line and corner, because that's what the Commanders need the most right now. But there's no way Hendon Hooker is out there even doing anything. There's no way. If he is, he's out there on one leg. And then Clayton Tune from Houston, who I'm also not very aware of. So Charles London is getting greatness out of this group of guys. And then the receivers, I mean, it's just a weak wide receiver class, period. Even ignoring the American team, even if you go a little bit more macro and look at the entire Senior Bowl, and then go more macro than that and look at the entire draft class, this is not a good receiver class. Luckily for him, he got my boy Kenny McIntosh as a running back, and also my Georgia Bulldog Warren McClendon Jr. at tackle. And then he also has Darnell Wright, Tennessee, at offensive line. So again, he has some really good offensive linemen. Those are just a couple to name several good offensive linemen that he had at his disposal right now. But receiver-wise, I mean, I don't know, man. I really don't know. Remember, all of the top QBs that's projected to even go within the first 2 rounds all skipped the Senior Bowl. Even Stetson Bennett skipped the Senior Bowl. So Charles London is out here making it work and dominating the national team's defense, who has some pretty good players on it, especially in the secondary and linebacker group. With this crop of quarterbacks and wide receivers, I think that's impressive as well. So how much production he's getting out of these guys is really impressive. And here's a quote from him from a couple of days ago from the Senior Bowl. He said, quote, "We want to look clean and precise, and we want guys to execute well. I'm going to have to think of the game in a different way. What hash is the ball on? How much time is left in the game? How many timeouts do we have?" Unquote. Because remember, he's potentially going from QB's coach to offensive coordinator for the first time in his NFL career. So that's a good point that he's bringing up, that he has to think of things that he's never thought of before. But naturally, ignoring the name, ignoring the resume, if you just told me would I prefer to hire a QB's coach or a running backs coach as my next offensive coordinator, I would take the QB's coach. But of course, there's a lot more involved than that. And Thomas Bryant, my favorite candidate, went from running backs coach to tight ends coach, and I still want him. But then again, tight ends have a better understanding of the entire offense in its entirety than running backs anyway. But still, moving on, he also said, quote, "Those are all things I think about in games, and you think you know how you'll handle situations, but you never really know until you're into it. I'll be in the situation on February 4th, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure I'll want a play call back or whatever, but you don't know until you do it. So I think it'll be great for my professional development to be a coordinator, to present an offense and do the installs, and then go out there and call a game on Saturday," unquote. And that's a good point as well. This is really his trial run. This is almost an audition. I mean, say he goes out there during the actual Senior Bowl Bowl game on Saturday, and the American team offense is just crazy good, and you can tell it's because of his coaching and his play calling. That may increase the chances of him getting a really good offensive coordinator job out there, and maybe even potentially with the Commanders. And remember, this is the first year a Senior Bowl staff comes from several different teams, with coaches serving in a higher capacity than they normally do with their current employers. That allows position coaches to gain experience as coordinators and coordinators to be head coaches and so forth. Head coach Arthur Smith nominated Charles London for the Senior Bowl, and London was told recently that he'll have the grand opportunity ahead of him. He'll also serve two distinct parties in this week-long enterprise. Remember, he needs to create an offensive game plan that's simple enough for these players to execute well, because these are all new players that have basically never played with each other, never been coached by Charles London and all of these positional coaches ever, and they have less than a week to do it. And then it also has to be good enough for these players to showcase their skills without much preparation or practice, and also provide enough substance to go out there and then win a game at the end of the day. That's a crazy combination of factors that Charles London is tasked with doing. And again, if he goes out there and this American team looks good tomorrow, as in Saturday, you're probably watching this on Saturday, so maybe today for some of y'all, that could be a big boost in his chances of becoming an offensive coordinator in the NFL, and maybe even for the Commanders. But let's take a look at his history. Remember, he's also meeting with the Tennessee Titans for their offensive coordinator job, but I haven't heard of any other interviews he's gotten for offensive coordinator around the NFL. As of right now, I've only heard Commanders and Titans, just like Eric Bieniemy is pretty much us in the Ravens. But you got to remember, London has never been an offensive coordinator during his 18 years of coaching in college and the NFL. He had also never held the position of QB's coach until new Falcons head coach Arthur Smith hired him for that role just in 2021. He's only been doing it for 2 years. London and Smith were quality control coaches for the Titans for 1 year together in 2011, which is interesting. So Arthur Smith saw what he did all the way back in 2011, remembered it. He must have made some type of impression on him, because way later, 10 years later, he brings him up to be the QB's coach for his Falcons that he's the head coach of. And remember, he mostly dealt with running backs throughout his entire career. I mean, literally, he was a running back in college. He was a running back in the NFL for a little while. And then he was a running backs coach, or quality control coach, which is even lower in responsibility, his entire time until 2021, when he became the QB's coach for the Falcons. And that's not much of a rich history there, because I didn't see much development from Marcus Mariota or Desmond Ridder there as far as QB play goes, but we did see them use their legs very well. And if he deserves any of the credit for how the Falcons ran the ball this past season, even specifically just quarterback alone, even ignoring Cordero Patterson and that running back group, we're just talking about the way Marcus Mariota ran against us, then there's some rich history right there, and a nice sample size for us to look at as far as keeping him as a candidate for offensive coordinator. And also remember, he's one of 6 people that we've already interviewed, Anthony Lynn being the most recent, and then Eric Bieniemy could potentially become the 7th person that we interview. Moving on, also, former Commanders offensive coordinator Scott Turner is set to join Josh McDaniels' staff with the Raiders with an elevated pass game role, sources say, a key hire in Las Vegas. And that ended up being more breaking news than I expected. I thought Scott Turner would end up going somewhere, and if he didn't end up becoming an offensive coordinator, just like how he is with the Raiders, he's not an offensive coordinator, I thought that would just kind of just go through the breeze and nobody would really notice. But Ian Rappaport feels like it's pretty significant news. And just to update y'all, he is becoming the pass game coordinator, so that's all he's doing. And remember, Scott Turner also played college football at UNLV, so that's his connection to Las Vegas. That's where he played his college ball. And also, his dad, Norv Turner, previously served as the Raiders head coach in Oakland. Not in Las Vegas, but in Oakland. So those are some connections right there. And maybe Josh McDaniels saw some things that Scott Turner did and was like, we can work with that. Because honestly, first of all, let's get it out the way. Everything that went wrong this season was not Scott Turner's fault, like a lot of people act like it is. Now, again, I'm happy that we fired Scott Turner. I'm a risk taker. I'm shoot for the stars, and if we fail, we fail, but I hate playing it safe more than anything else. Scott Turner is somewhere like in the average. He's nowhere near as bad as people act like, but there's also way better potential coordinators out there. So again, I'm happy that we fired him. I'm a risk taker. I mean, I'm willing to take Anthony Richardson in this upcoming draft. I'm going to swing big and miss big. I'm just that type of person. I hate this perpetual mediocrity that we always end up producing, winning 7 to 9 games a season. Absolutely hate that. That's worst case scenario for me. So again, Scott Turner was that middle that I do not like, but a lot of people are acting like everything was his fault. And again, I'm going to say head like I was saying it throughout the season. Guys were open. A lot of the time it was because the offensive line couldn't block long enough for the quarterback to get those open receivers the ball, or Taylor Heinicke and Carson Wentz either just wouldn't see them or would just throw an inaccurate pass or throw it late, throw it too early or whatever. But Scott Turner was scheming guys open. His play calling was bad, which is why he's no longer our offensive coordinator. But as far as designing a passing attack and scheming up plays and then letting somebody else call those plays, I think Scott Turner could actually thrive in that role. Again, Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and Curtis Samuel, if you watch the All-22 from a lot of our games, especially even the games where we didn't produce a lot of points and a lot of yards, guys were open a lot. So I can see Scott Turner, as long as he's not calling plays, being able to contribute in a positive way to an NFL organization in an NFL offense. Moving on, next major topic, last major topic. The Ravens are interviewing Georgia offensive coordinator QB's coach Todd Monkin a second time today. Monken is one of the handful of offensive coordinators to get a second interview in Baltimore. He's also interviewed with the Buccaneers. Now, first of all, let me just go ahead and get this out the way. As a Georgia fan, I don't want to see Todd Monken go for no reason. I hope we offer that man the highest paid contract in college history. He's already the highest paid non-head coach in college football. Hey, make it more. Give him a personal helicopter. Do whatever you got to do. Whatever he wants, give it to him. Please keep him in Georgia. Because as a Georgia Bulldogs fan and a Commanders fan, the loss of Todd Monken hurts me more as a Georgia fan than the potential gain of an Eric Bieniemy to the Commanders. It just does. Say Todd Monken ends up becoming the Ravens offensive coordinator and the Commanders end up getting Eric Bieniemy. I would be pretty happy that we have Eric Bieniemy, but overall, that's a net negative for me as a fan of both teams. I would prefer if we just got Eric Bieniemy without Todd Monken having to leave Georgia. Or if we just hired somebody else like Charles London, Thomas Brown. But I really do not want to see Todd Monken go for any situation. But if that's how the dominoes end up falling, it is what it is. I would be happy to have Eric Bieniemy. But again, I will be too sad about Todd Monken leaving Georgia to be truly happy. But it is what it is. But yeah, JP Finley tweeted about it. He said Ravens are viewed by some as primary competition with the Commanders for Eric Bieniemy. And now Baltimore has conducted 2 interviews with Monken and others. I don't think Washington has conducted second interviews with any offensive coordinator candidate. So that's a good point as well. We haven't interviewed anybody twice. The Ravens are further ahead in their process. And the Colts, I don't know what they got going on. They're out here doing 8-hour plus long interviews. And they're already on to third interviews. I mean, how many times you got to interview somebody to know that you want them? So I don't know what they're doing. We're behind and the Colts are doing too much. I feel like the Ravens are that nice middle. But yeah, man, they've already interviewed Todd Monken and other offensive coordinators twice. We haven't even interviewed one twice. And I'm not even sure if Eric Bieniemy is one of those guys that they've interviewed twice. So maybe they don't like him, and maybe Eric Bieniemy is already out of the running for the Ravens. But remember, yesterday, Ian Rappaport reported on Pat McAfee's morning show, live stream. I uploaded it as a video and everything. You can go check that out. He said that it's pretty much down to the top candidates being the Commanders and the Ravens for Eric Bieniemy as offensive coordinator. But yeah, man, as a Georgia fan, please no, man. We can find another way to get Eric Bieniemy, but I don't need to lose Todd Monken to do it, man. And again, I like Eric Bieniemy a lot, but Thomas Brown is my favorite candidate regardless of other factors, ignoring any other factors. And now I'm starting to become a big fan of Charles London from what I'm hearing, because I was already somewhat of a fan of Charles London. I like the mystery there. I prefer the mystery and the potential of a Charles London even before today and all the Senior Bowl stuff. I prefer that over the evil that we already kind of know of Pat Shurmur and Anthony Lynn. I'm not really excited about those guys, or Ken Zampese. Charles London was already above those guys already, because at least I didn't know the bad or the good that he had. I already know the good and the bad from those other guys. And, you know, neither of them are really terrible candidates, you could say, but I'm not excited about any of those three. So I already had Charles London above those guys already. But now after all of this Senior Bowl news and everything, Charles London may be above Eric Bieniemy for me. I don't know. I got to see. Maybe neck and neck. And again, Thomas Brown is still my number one for sure, but I'm just not sure if that's going to happen. And then lastly, before we get up out of here, at EB Junkies on Twitter, and I know the Junkies, we don't usually like them for things, but this was interesting that they pointed this out. They said, they tweeted, "This was pointed out to me and maybe others have noticed, but it's interesting when Kobe Gibbs passed, the commander statement was from Dan and Tanya. Announcing Bobby Beathard's passing, there is no mention of Dan and Tanya anywhere." And of course, RIP to all of those guys, especially most recently Bobby Beathard. But that's really interesting when you look at the statements, the official statements from the Commanders a while ago. For Coy Gibbs, it said from Dan and Tanya Snyder for the statement. This most recent statement for Bobby Beathard does not have them attached at all. So it's already looking like a done deal even before that they were going to sell the team again by March at the latest, which is coming up fairly soon. Hopefully before free agency, please. But this just adds like a cherry on top. You know what I'm saying? It's a sad situation, but there's a positive light that comes from it for sure. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please leave a like on this video if you liked it, if you learned anything. As always, man, I appreciate all the support, man. Shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors, whose names you see scrolling on the screen right now. Let me know in the comment section how you feel about Charles London and all of the news that I presented to you. Did everything I talk about today as far as Charles London make you want him more? Did it move him higher on your preference list for potential offensive coordinators? Also, let me know how you feel about the Todd Monkin and Bieniemy situation. Also, let me know how you feel about Scott Turner getting a new job with the Raiders. Do you feel like it's a setup for the Raiders to fail? Do you feel like with the Raiders being so chaotic that Scott Turner's being set up to fail on his end? You know, is it just a match made in heaven of just chaos and failure? Let me know how y'all feel about that. And of course, man, I appreciate all the support. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.